I saw this video and it was someone dyeing their hair, and then I was thinking, why have I never done this? And I couldn't think of a good enough reason, so I dyed my hair. What's going on, guys? Welcome to this video. My name is Cameron and today we are in Manchester. Like, obviously you can tell by the video I'm not in my London apartment. I've come up to Manchester because it's my 23rd birthday. Apparently 23 is like your prime age of life. Like, apparently you're supposed to feel your best and you're also supposed to look the best that you ever will, like, for your entire life. So try not to think about it too much. Today is April 24th. And I'm seeing Avengers Endgame at midnight tonight. Now, the movie isn't supposed to release until the 26th, but I'm seeing it a day earlier. So I'm gonna do a review of it, but I'm not sure whether it'll be up when this video goes up or whatever. So I'm just gonna say click up here and it'll just appear. Actually, you can probably see that Avengers premiere documented on my Instagram story. So if you haven't yet, click the link in the description and follow me on Instagram because, like, everything will be on there. But yeah, anyway, today's review is Ultimate Spider-Man issue 120. So the previous issue had Liz Allen discovering her mutant powers for the first time. And I did mention about the comic that I really loved it, how it had these really personal elements in it, like where the story was really condensed into like a really tight storyline just between this group of friends and not really too much action going on. I did actually mention that the comic got a lot better when Spider-Man arrived on the pages. He just added a little bit of a flair, like a little bit of color to the comic. And then out of nowhere, like, Magneto just arrives, like he just appears on the final page. Well, some of you guys might not be aware of Magneto in the Ultimate Universe as much if you've only been following the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, but if you was following the Ultimate comics in general, like Ultimate X-Men and Ultimate Fantastic Four and all that stuff, then Magneto is actually already an established character in the Ultimate Universe, but obviously he's never been really in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics before. So yeah, in this comic we're going to be getting Liz Allen obviously discovering her powers a little bit more and like why Magneto is here. It's really interesting, and we do have something between Spider-Man and Liz Allen that I think you guys are really looking forward to and hoping. Actually, I'm not saying anything, but it's good and it's really interesting. So let's get into Ultimate Spider-Man issue 120. Okay, so as always, the comic picks up directly from where the previous issue left off, and Magneto is just pretty much right there. And he's immediately given us the storyline that Liz Allen isn't who she thinks she is. Which, by the way, I'm going to be honest, sounds a little bit cliche, but I'm not sure if it's cliche just because this comic is kind of old or whether it was cliche back when this comic released. Either way, it's cliche. On the other hand though, I am loving how Magneto comes across as this super powerful character, just sort of breaking that ice wall from Iceman, and it's like he's not even trying. I also think the comic does a really good job of introducing us to Magneto, especially those of us who haven't read any of the other Ultimate comics, as this is the first time that Magneto has appeared in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics, and already you can kind of tell that Magneto must be a pretty bad guy if Iceman is sort of reacting the way he is. So yeah, you definitely get the impression that Magneto is a bad guy. I also think the art style works really well in this situation as well. I don't know why. I think it's maybe because they're in the air, but it just seems like it works a lot better than usual. Or maybe it's because the artist is really good at drawing X-Men related characters. I don't know. Now, right now in the panel on screen, we've got Magneto sort of trying to avoid the question of revealing who her father is. It really seems like just an excuse not to reveal who her father is to not only her, but to us as the reader as well. So in a way, I feel like Iceman is kind of like how we're reacting by saying that Magneto is full of bull. And of course, because of this particular part of the comic, it does feel like this section does drag on for a little bit longer than it should do, or at least it needs to. Because we're basically not learning anything, it's just Magneto there for like, it just seems like it's dragging a little bit. But anyway, as we get further into the comic, I just want to remind you guys that you have to remember the reactions from Liz Allen are like this because she has a mutant phobia. It's been kind of prominent in the previous comics before, and so that's why she's freaking out so much because, well, she's got a mutant phobia. So I like how the development of her character is continuous from what it was in the past Ultimate Spider-Man comics, and it's still ongoing and developing because obviously she's more of a side character, but it's nice to see that they remember all of these little details about her. But again, getting further into the comic, I really like how the mother of Liz Allen kind of hesitates to tell her. It really gives off that vibe that he's not a good person, and especially obviously he's not a good person because he's teaming up with Magneto. I also wasn't a huge fan of how Liz Allen sort of hates her mother instantly. It's like all this time she's been looking for an excuse to have this reason to hate her. But of course, in the past Ultimate Spider-Man comics, maybe that's one of the reasons why she doesn't like mutants, is because she knows maybe her mother had something to do with them or something along those lines. I don't know, I can't remember. But now getting into the favourite part of the comic is when the X-Men arrive. I think the art style is phenomenal on these guys, like especially Cyclops in the middle. It just looks so badass, like a formed team. I don't know, but it looks really good. Before we go any further, guys, hit that subscribe button and the like button. I mean, halfway through the comic and it's getting really good, so if you want more, down, go down. Yeah, that red button right there. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on, I also do think it's really weird how Magneto didn't expect Liz Allen to have hesitations in a way. Like, she's literally just got her powers. But something that I think the comic does really well that makes it believable as to why Liz doesn't just go instantly with the X-Men, because obviously they're the good guys, is because she doesn't like mutants in general, and obviously the X-Men are like peak mutant like famous. So it's understandable why she wouldn't go with the X-Men straight away, and of course understandable why she wouldn't go with just Magneto, because obviously he's a terrorist. I like how the past development of the character has sort of come into play in this comic. Maybe not explaining, but sort of, if you know her character, then you'll understand the decisions a hell of a lot better. As we get even further into the comic as well, I'm getting a little bit more of that Clone Saga vibe going on, you know, like where you feel like everything's kind of falling to pieces, there's families falling apart, and it sort of makes you reminisce back to that time when Spider-Man had to remember where Mary Jane was hiding back in that warehouse, and I think that was back in the Clone Saga as well, and now again we've got to do it with Liz Allen and figure out where she's run off to. Like, you can see the elements from past comics playing really well into this one as well, and again we're about to witness more elements from the Clone Saga and past comics, because actually one thing that I was really curious about was, why is Mary Jane at home? Like, how long has it been since Liz Allen flew away from the beach? But this is a really exciting moment because this is where Peter Parker reveals his identity to Liz Allen, and Spider-Man revealing his identity hasn't happened for a while, especially like with villains and all that stuff. Nobody's really found out that Peter Parker is Spider-Man for like the last 20 issues, unless I'm just forgetting. But it does actually feel really necessary to a certain extent, because this gets Liz Allen to listen to Spider-Man, because technically he's just another hero. She doesn't really think he knows what he's talking about until he makes this move. And I just love her reaction, the way that she's like, oh my god, it all makes sense now. Like, she never really thought that Peter Parker would be Spider-Man, which is why it makes this reveal so great. And it was hinted in the last couple of issues that this was going to happen, because you could just tell by how Liz was trying to pester Spider-Man to reveal his identity, like it was going to happen sooner or later. But now that is pretty much where the comic ends for the main story. So the comic isn't ended yet. We're about to go over to something called the Savage Land, and we're going back many years ago, way back, to finally see who Liz Allen's father truly is. And it turns out the villain known as the Blob, who is actually quite famous, is the father of Liz Allen. And it's so interesting because it shows Magneto and the Blob making this deal about how he wants to bring his family over to the Savage Land, and it very much seems like Magneto is the one to do that. Now what's interesting as well is the fact that Magneto is the one to do it if the Blob can't do it himself. So that also crops up the question of, is the Blob dead? Like, why is Magneto doing this? Why is he trying to recruit Liz Allen himself? We'll have to find out. But guys, that is it for this issue. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for reading. But let's go back on camera and talk about some of the highlights of the comic and what we're going to rate it overall. Okay, so I think the most obvious thing to talk about is Peter Parker revealing his identity to Liz Allen, because in the beginning of the Ultimate Spider-Man series, Peter everyone just kind of found out Peter was Spider-Man anyway, because he was so amateur, like Mary Jane, like Harry Osborn, like Green Goblin, Norman Osborn, it was all that. So Peter doesn't really reveal his identity to anybody unless it's like a serious thing. And it was a lot more impactful considering Liz had no idea that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Like, she knew that Peter and Mary Jane and Kitty Pryde had like this love triangle, but she never pieced it together that Peter Parker could be Spider-Man. Like, it's just something that never crossed her mind. I loved her reaction to that, especially because suddenly her problem didn't matter anymore because she was so mind blown. But going into some of the moments just before that, the best panel in the comic by far is when the X-Men appeared. I mean, look at Cyclops. He looks so cool, and like the rest of the X-Men, you can definitely tell that Cyclops is sort of the leader of the X-Men at this point, especially in the Ultimate Universe. I don't know Ultimate X-Men comics because I never read them, but it looks really good, especially the artwork as well. I think the blue costumes really get brought out with like the coloring and like the art and everything. So how do I say this? This artist is really good at drawing the X-Men characters. Wow, what a good review. But onto one of the main characters of the comic is Magneto. So when he appeared, it's interesting to see that he wasn't there to cause any conflict. He was there for a purpose, for a reason. He sort of hints at it a little bit, but we don't actually know what that is. And I'm just gonna let you guys know that we'll be finding out what that is very soon. Like, I'm talking like within the next couple of issues. It sort of sounds like this impending doom that's just kind of going to arrive, and it sort of is an impending doom. It's on that scale, so it's really interesting. But again, Magneto gave off this presence that he was like an all-powerful mutant. Like, you know, one of those situations where he didn't really have to say anything. What's the word? I forgot the word. Oh, his mannerisms, that he knows he's more powerful than everybody else. Like, it's just one of those things. So I like how his presence was carried over on the panels to us as the reader, and yeah, I feel like the writing really depicted that well. But now onto some of the negatives. I feel like the pacing of the comic was a little bit off in certain areas, and the second half of the comic was a little bit faster paced than like the first half. So if you look at Liz Allen, she just kind of instantaneously hates her mum forever. You know what I mean? It just kind of seems a little bit rushed. And also the decision with the X-Men and like Magneto and which side to go for. In the end, she chose to go with the X-Men, but you don't really feel like there's a reason to read the next issue, so to speak. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And of course, you could see at the end of the comic that it was in fact the Blob who was the father, and he's actually like a well-known villain, so like, that's also really interesting. Now, overall, I'm going to give the comic a 7 out of 10. It was due to the fact that the pacing of the comic was a little bit all over the place towards the end, and in doing so, it kind of made the comic feel a little bit anticlimactic in a way. Like, even though there were some cool moments with Spider-Man revealing his identity and a little bit of a fight between Magneto, it didn't really lead to anything crazy. But yeah, guys, that is it for this issue, and that is it for this review. So thank you so much for watching. So I actually upload small reviews of stuff onto my Instagram TV, so I will be doing a quick Avengers Endgame non-spoilers review as soon as I come out of the cinema. Link in the description. In terms of these videos, if you want more Ultimate Spider-Man, if you want more Spider-Geddon and just comics in general after we finish this series, then hit the subscribe button and the like button. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye. Okay, so this video should be here, but if I reviewed Avengers Endgame already on YouTube, then it's not out yet, but it will be, so it should be here. And if you want to check out my reviews for Spider-Geddon, you can click here as well. See you later.